that a secret CIA report concluded, quote, that Russia intervened in the 2016 election.
Tell me what the specific source that you have. I just don't know whether it's true or not.
These are not anonymous sources to us, those of us who are reporting these.
A Toronto woman says she wound up in a shelter after she lent her life savings to her realtor.
I think a lot of people just wanted to make sure that she could get out of that shelter as quickly as possible.
I'm Diana Swain. We're the investigators. This is what we do. Sometimes the only way journalists can reveal the truth is when sources agree to speak anonymously. That's how we learned about Watergate and the sponsorship scandal. But this week, another investigative story has been raising questions about secret sources and whether the public can trust them. A bombshell headline from one of America's most influential newspapers.
Breaking news tonight, the Washington Post is now reporting that a secret CIA report concluded, quote, that Russia intervened in the 2016 election to help Donald Trump win the presidency.
A story that questions his win just weeks before Donald Trump's inauguration as president.
I think it's ridiculous. I think it's just another excuse.
The Washington Post reporting of the CIA's secret assessment was based on information from sources who asked not to be named. So was a follow-up story done by the New York Times, both drawing criticism from Trump's party and supporters.
But the facts don't add up, and I think that the idea that the media immediately sides with these unnamed sources is a problem.
But Republican politicians aren't the only ones raising questions about the use of anonymous sources. So are investigative journalists such as Glenn Greenwald. He's gone as far as calling the reporting classic American journalism of the worst sort. At a time when journalists are fighting to be believed, can a story stand on anonymous sources alone anymore? We want to put the question to Greg Miller, who was part of the Washington Post reporting team that broke the CIA story. Greg, I don't have to tell you that much of the public is cynical about the work of journalists these days. So in that climate, how do you put forward a story that's based on anonymous sources that the public can't test?
We use anonymous sources reluctantly. Obviously, ideally, in an ideal world, we'd be able to name all of our sources and have full transparency to our readers. And so but that's not possible, especially in the kind of reporting that we're talking about here, national security reporting on sensitive intelligence assessments that are often classified. So there is this trade-off. Does the public need to know this information? And in a case like this, the answer is clearly yes. And the other point I would make is just that these are anonymous sources to the public, and I get that. And there should be an additional level of skepticism on the part of readers. But these are not anonymous sources to us, those of us who are reporting this information.
The NBC News is moving the ball a little bit further now and saying that Putin himself was directly involved in the interference. When people are looking for provable truth, and as you say, these are people that you trust, how do journalists balance that?
We may never know the extent of Putin's involvement in this. The CIA may never know. But, that shouldn't preclude us from trying to get out stories that get at critical kind of milestone developments in the ongoing investigation of what looks to be a fairly serious Russian intervention in a U.S. election. If we were to be held to this sort of standard of we need, evidence, hard evidence that we can lay out for readers in all of these cases, this story might not have run. The American public might not know about this, and frankly, I would welcome Glenn Greenwald and others to do their own reporting, and to see how it lines up. Our story has held together pretty nicely, I would say. Nothing has surfaced to discredit it.
I want you to take people through a little bit how you determine whether a source is telling you the truth, because the level of accountability is different, right? They're accountable to you, but not the public at large when they keep their identity hidden.
There have been cases where sources, anonymous sources, had deliberately misled newspapers, journalists, news organizations, and that is such a violation, that is regarded as such a fundamental violation of that reporter-source trust relationship, that I think most reporters would regard it as severed at that point and would feel free to identify that source because of the misleading information that was provided. But to get back to your original question, I mean, it's what it is. It's basic reporting. I mean, it is. You hear something from one source, you want corroboration from as many other sources as you can get. We're not taking something we get from a specific individual and failing to check it. We run it past other people who we have established relationships with, often over many, many years. I mean, I have covered national security in Washington for 15 years now. I have a list of people who I have known for a long time. They may not know firsthand about some of the information that I'm writing about, but at least I can run things past them and ask them, does this make sense to you? But our story was based on multiple sources from multiple parts of government.
It's important work. Thanks for talking to us about it.
Thank you.
Giving an investigative journalist confidential or sensitive information can carry huge risks. A person's job, even their personal safety, can be on the line, which is why many sources ask to remain anonymous. It's a request that journalists take seriously.
If they can't protect those sources, they can't do their job.
In the U.S., most states have enacted so-called shield laws to protect journalists and their sources, but no such protection exists in Canada.
If something goes to court and the court orders me, I may not be able to do it unless I want to go to jail or pay a fine.
In fact, journalists here can be compelled by a judge to give up the identity of an anonymous source or risk being thrown in jail for contempt of court, and that's happened at least twice in this country. Now, a conservative senator is trying to change that.
The presence of whistleblower is very important.
Claude Carignan has introduced a private member's bill that, if passed, would amend parts of the Canada Evidence Act, allowing a journalist to refuse to disclose the identity of a source. So why does he think that's necessary? Senator, what is your reason for spearheading this bill?
In fact, it's to protect free press. Free press is very important in Canada. We are a democracy, and we have to make sure that the journalists could have access to the sources, that they will be able to do their job properly and take the government accountable. That's an important role of the media.
It was revealed earlier this year that Quebec police had in fact been watching some journalists there in at least one case, listening to their phone calls, which would have the effect of revealing secret sources. And I want to hear your thoughts on that. But first, I want to play a quick clip from our CBC Radio Canada colleague, Marie-Maude Denis. She's an investigative reporter in Quebec. Here's what she said.
You always promise your confidential sources that you're going to protect them no matter what, that you're going to go to jail if they force you to reveal your sources. But we can't fight equally with the police that has tremendous powers to access these data.
How concerned are you about that very point, that police could be using this surveillance ability to find out who these secret sources are?
Yeah, that's a danger. That's the reason why I tabled a bill to make sure that if something happened, that the journalists will not be used to target sources.
You've also been trying to figure out just how widespread this is, and you put that question to CSIS to find out how many journalists may have been followed or surveyed in some way over the years. You were expecting an answer to that, I gather, and you got something far short of that this week.
Yeah, I was surprised about the answer because when I asked the question, the CSIS employees said, "Okay, I will give you the answer by in a couple of weeks." And when I received the answer, it's "Oh, we changed our mind, so we cannot give you this information."
We'll certainly follow its progress with interest. Thanks for talking to us.
Yes, thank you. Welcome.
Of course, surveillance isn't new. Wiretapping in this country goes back decades to the dawn of the Cold War. But finding out who the RCMP targeted and why, well, that remains a secret. My colleague Dave Seglins tried to track down a secret order that authorized surveillance in the 50s, 60s, and beyond. Read his investigation online at CBCNews.ca.
I don't know what to do anymore.
This woman is supposed to be living in this condo tower. Instead, she's living in a shelter, and she blames her real estate agent. We'll dig into this investigation just ahead. Plus,
Newfoundland is such a pristine environment that it's a sin, really, what we are doing with it.
in this bay and across the country, sewage is spewing into waterways. Just one of the 5 things we learned this week from investigative journalism. Our weekly roundup is next. But first,
good evening. Some important breaking news to report right now. This was the scene directly above Darwin.
yes, the man in red is on his way.
It's important that Darwin boys and girls go to bed now.
And journalists around the globe are keeping tabs on him, revealing the, science behind his work.
From a snow den in the North Pole, Santa uses technology better than that used by the United States National Security Agency to spy on world leaders.
Why even that other guy with white facial hair is following the situation.
Has more of a military feel to it. Let's go back to our Pentagon correspondent, Barbara Starr.
Santa's got a couple of F-18s on his tail.
Militarizing Santa?
Any plans for drone use by Santa this year?
Yikes. 'Tis the season when serious journalists are consumed by Christmas.
General, tell us, how do you track Santa?
Enough of this chicanery. Who is this guy anyway? It's time to get at the truth. The Investigators is here to tell you that Santa Claus is... Happy holidays, everyone. Here are 5 things we learned this week from investigative journalists. CBC's Go Public reveals an Ontario woman's artwork ended up on clothing sold at major retailers without her permission. The U.S. company that supplies the shirts told the artist it is willing to negotiate a settlement. The Intercept reports cluster munitions manufactured by an American company are being used in the Yemen conflict. Washington has refused to confirm if it supplied the weapons, which are banned by 119 countries. CBC News learns the federal government's bid to merge hundreds of its websites into a single site is a year behind schedule and 10 times over budget. CBC News finds more than 205 billion liters of raw sewage and untreated wastewater was poured into Canada's rivers and oceans last year, in spite of federal regulations meant to solve the problem. And an investigation by the Indianapolis Star and USA Today reveals 368 gymnasts have alleged sexual abuse and exploitation in the United States over the past 20 years. Stories built on anonymous sources can raise all kinds of issues, and we've looked at some of that. But real pitfalls can also be found in sole source stories, one person's account of something that happened to them. So how do journalists approach that? A good example this week from CBC Toronto.
I have sleepless nights. I don't know, go to my MP or where to go to or who to talk to. It's just devastating.
Rita Fulciniti told CBC News she was built out of $95,000 by a Toronto realtor. Chaim Howard Smilovich asked the 66-year-old Fulciniti to let him borrow the money in 2015, money she'd originally intended to close a condo deal.
He says the police can't touch him because you agreed to this contract. And he said, well, the contract went bad, so, too bad for her.
The loan was supposed to have been paid back by August of last year, but fast forward to this month and still not a dime had been repaid. CBC investigative reporter John Lancaster spoke to Smilovich, who was fired from Remax back in June. When asked about the deal that went bad, he said he used the money to invest in a nightclub, but that unfortunately, quote, the money is lost. As for Fulciniti, she's now living in a shelter.
I'm devastated because I'm a senior. That was my life savings. Now I have absolutely nothing.
So, John, it's a terrible story to hear. How did you verify if it was true?
Well, first of all, we were aware that Rita had had a difficult life, some of her own issues, like many people do, but it was mostly about verifying her claims about this money. Was it handed over? Essentially, it was through document searches. We were able to obtain letters and checks returned from her bank that showed that any repayment came back NSF. And most importantly, though, was this promissory note that outlined the details of that $95,000, the fact that it was loaned, it wasn't some kind of joint investment, and the fact that there actually were terms to repay that money.
So then you wanted to find out what he had to say. Where did that lead you?
Again, some good old-fashioned document digging. You know, I know, maybe viewers don't know so much, but there's a whole multitude of ways to get information about people's financial status. What we learned pretty quickly was that he doesn't really have many assets, if any, to his name. His wife, though, had recently purchased a couple of condos, one in Boca Raton, Florida. We found that out through U.S. records. A condo here in Toronto was also purchased, again, through our domestic land registry records, as well as another condo property that the couple owned. And that was important to us because when we approached Mr. Smilovich, we wanted to know what his financial status was. Was he able to repay this money? He said no, but we were able to put to him, well, your wife has all these assets. Would you be interested in perhaps mortgaging one of those to repay? And he told me it didn't work that way.
So since this story has come out and people have had an obvious emotional reaction to it, what's happened?
Well, I think most importantly, Mr. Smilovich has now agreed to repay some of that money, $5,000. It's a start anyway. And he says he's going to be making payment plans to her. I think what's incredible, too, though, is lawyers, companies reaching out to offer her free legal representation. People say they'd open their homes to give her a warm room. One individual said he'd pay her rent for a year. I think a lot of people just wanted to make sure that she could get out of that shelter as quickly as possible and perhaps sort of get back on her feet, whatever that may be.
Yeah, the shelter's a long way from the condo she imagined she'd be in.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the story, John.
Okay.
Really wanted to talk about this heartbreaking story. This terminally ill 5-year-old boy died in the arms of Santa weeks before Christmas here.
A powerful story that went viral this week. It probably landed on your Facebook feed. But there's more to this story and lessons for us all. Plus, fake news or satire? You had questions about this popular CBC radio show.
That line between satire and fake news might have become blurred a bit.
We're getting some answers.
I'm Nil Köksal on assignment in Istanbul, Turkey. There have been 17 terror attacks in this country just this year. That deadly attempted coup and now an ongoing state of emergency. So this is a country, a city that seems to be in a constant state of suspicion. A tweet, the timing of a tweet, a column, an opinion can get you into trouble here. Still, many millennials here refuse to stay silent. Can they help Turkey change course? Look for that story in the weeks to come on CBC Radio, CBC Television, and CBCNews.ca.
Canadian motorists have been faced with the challenge of how do I communicate to other motorists while I'm driving? And so this commission has been put together to establish a new language between drivers using the car horn. John, let's go with pleasant greeting number 4. Copy.
An excerpt there from This Is That video. It's from the team that creates the CBC radio show of the same name. Now, if you haven't heard the program, it sounds a lot like a news show, except it's not. It's satire. Now, one viewer reached out to us to say, isn't that fake news? Well, we put that question to CBC Radio's Kathy Perry.
Thanks, Diana. Let me clarify right off the top. This Is That is satire. It has its tongue firmly planted in its cheek. It wants to have fun and do a send-up of a whole bunch of different issues, politics, culture, CBC Radio, and it hopes the audience has fun with it too. The goal is to make the audience laugh. The goal is comedy, not to mislead the public. But obviously the world has changed in the 6 years since This Is That launched. That line between satire and fake news might have become blurred a bit. With that in mind, we have changed how we present the content from the program online. It's very clearly branded at the top, CBC Comedy, so there's no confusion in the way people share material. And as to the radio program, we wouldn't want to give away the joke or spoil it that's made the program such a hit for listeners. And it's always looking for that balance between staying true to the tone of the program and not misleading the audience.
Thanks, Kathy. We always want to hear from you. Share story tips anonymously at securedrop.cbc.ca. Email us your questions or your comments, investigators@cbc.ca, or just reach out to us on Twitter @Swain Diana. Journalists can sometimes get caught believing what someone tells them because you think it's just not something they would lie about.
This is Sergeant Frank Gervais.
Like the guy I interviewed about his military service at this Remembrance Day ceremony a couple of years ago. It later turned out he was only posing as a soldier. Who would lie about that? Or about this?
I had on him and he just kind of looked up at me and he says, "Santa, can you help me?"
That's Eric Schmidt-Motzen, a part-time mall Santa from Kentucky whose personal story was seen all over the world this week. He told the Knoxville News Sentinel that he was called to the local hospital by a nurse he knew to comfort a dying boy who then died in his arms. He didn't reveal the nurse's name or the boy's family in order to protect their privacy.
And that's when he passed.
I kind of hate to admit it. I wasn't sure I believed the story, and that kind of bothered me because as a journalist, I want to be a critical thinker, not a cynical thinker. And that's why I was just as annoyed as all those people who were really moved by the story when this happened. On Wednesday, the Sentinel said it couldn't find anyone else who could verify the story, and fearing it was false, pulled it off the website. The real problem with fake news isn't what it's doing to journalism, it's what it's doing to all of us. When cynicism takes hold, it's pretty tough to shake. The truth is that a lot of good people do good things every day. And if ever there's a time of year when we should all just get to believe a little bit, this is it. I'm Diana Swain. We're The Investigators. We'll be back with all new shows beginning January 7th. Until then, happy holidays.